#1 show that dominates cable news, The O'Reilly Factor.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm Bill O'Reilly. A personal story segment tonight. Just a few minutes, President Bush will try to persuade the nation that more troops and a timetable for the Iraqi government might turn things around in that chaotic country. With us now, Fox News analyst General Wesley Clark. As you heard my talking points memo, and you might have heard Dan Senor say, the Bush administration was surprised that the country didn't turn around and didn't embrace democracy the way, I don't know about Afghan, but certainly the Afghan people were much more helpful to the United States than the Iraqis have been. Did that surprise you?
No, I didn't expect the whole idea that you could roll into Baghdad and be treated like the liberation of Paris. It was a fantasy.
But we rolled into Kabul and we were treated pretty well.
Yes, because Kabul had been oppressed in a significant way by the Taliban. And because when the Americans...
Had the Shia been oppressed by Saddam?
There was happiness to some extent.
Happiness but there were also, among the Shia?
Absolutely, when we came in. But...
Oh, when we came in.
But,
okay.
But that's a far cry from the country just forming itself and moving on. You remember when we came in, we completely... All the bureaucracy was Sunni.
Obliterated it all.
That was the end of the bureaucracy,
right.
The end of the government, the end of the army, the end of a functioning society. And the Shia also, they had a grudge. They had a grudge against the Sunnis. They had a grudge against Saddam. In 1991, when President George H. Bush more or less suggested that the Iraqi people themselves would overthrow Saddam, the Shia rose up. And there was a strong expectation that the United States might be there to support them, and we weren't there to support them.
All right, but let's fast forward to now. You're the commander-in-chief. You're in charge. You're the president. So there are two decisions he has to make. Do you give it one more chance, and do you do it like this? I mean, obviously, he wants, it's better for the United States and the world if Iraq becomes a functioning democracy. I don't know whether that can happen, probably won't. But do you give it one more chance with this scenario that he's going to lay out in a few moments? Do you do it?
I think what you've got to do is change the strategy. I think the scenario that he's given us isn't a change in the strategy.
Well, give me a specific change that you would implement.
Well, what I would do is I'd take a group of high-level diplomats that had the confidence of the president, and I'd write out a list of principles of what I wanted to see in the future in the Middle East, and I'd send them off on a Gulf Stream and tell them, don't come back till you've talked to everybody, including Iran and Syria. And I'd have with them, I'd have a kit bag of carrots and sticks. And it might have economic aid, it might have economic sanctions, it might have troop deployments.
Do you really think that would work?
I think it gets it started. And I think if you don't do that, look, when we went into Iraq, and Bill, you know this, there were lots of people talking about Iraq was the first step, and then Syria and Lebanon, and then we got to do something about regime change in Iran. These countries decided that the only way they could defend themselves was to make it impossible for us to succeed in Iraq.
There's some truth to that.
Let me just finish. If we don't talk to these countries,
okay, I'm all for talking. I've always said that. Chat with them, talk with them. But meantime, the security in Iraq is bad.
But listen,
while they're talking,
you put 20,000 troops in. You don't think Iran can turn the dial up and put a few more warheads in and do a little more training and get the...
I don't know whether they can or not. I'm hoping that they can.
And I can tell you they're right there and they're right next door.
Right.
They've got their hand on the rheostat. And so simply putting troops in and hoping for the best, especially with a 2-month or 4-month or 6-month timeline...
You think it's a fiasco?
Well, I don't think it's going to produce what we want. And even if it did, let's think of this. Let's say the violence, like magic, just disappeared. Or
goes down.
Let's say it went down. Let's say it went down dramatically.
Right. Okay. That's what I hope happens.
What does that do to advance our aims in the Middle East?
Well, it gives the democracy, the functioning democracy, a chance in Iraq to rebuild its country. So once you get the violence under control, then you can start to get the services back, the jobs back, because it's all about Baghdad.
It's not all about Baghdad. It's all about the region.
Most about Baghdad.
Suppose that they start to rebuild.
Right.
That they rebuild a state that's very closely aligned with Iran. After all, Iran is their neighbor.
Yeah, we don't want that.
We're going to be gone. They have to live with Iran. And there are some cultural ties there. And many of these people, like Hakim, lived in Iran. So I suppose they do that. Now, and let's suppose then that there's a Shia corridor that connects Iran and most of Iraq, southern Iraq, goes into Syria and then into Lebanon. Now, then what?
Then we have trouble.
Exactly.
Then we have
so
trouble.
How is it that
we're going to be there in Iraq. We're not leaving Iraq.
How is it that the troop surge is connected to our strategic aims
all the troop surge does,
in the region?
whether if it succeeds, is it calms the violence down so improvements in the infrastructure can be made and training can accelerate. I agree with you that we have to confront Iran in a diplomatic way. Where I disagree with you is that you seem to be putting hope in that strategy. I don't put much hope in that strategy, and I'll point to North Korea, and I'll point to other fanatics, because these people are bent on destroying us, General. They want to kill us. So, yeah, you can talk to them all day long, but to put optimism on the table.
I'm not putting any optimism on it, Bill, but here's the thing about this. Iran and other nations, they may be our enemies. You lived in this country when we had 6,000 Soviet warheads pointed at us. Khrushchev came over here and said he'd bury us.
Yeah,
they were our enemies.
Because we would destroy them back.
They didn't, that's right. But we didn't have to attack and destroy them. We kept it, and we talked to them, and we even had an embassy. And most of us didn't put much faith in it, but eventually, when we took
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Took apart the Soviet Union.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
What's wrong with this as a scenario? You talk with Iran. You hold them at bay. One way or another, somehow, Western influence seeps into Iran, and the people of Iran decide that there's a better way of living than being under the Ayatollahs.
I'm not opposed to that.
Isn't that a better approach than saying that we're going to have to go to war with them definitely?
If Iran continues to kill American soldiers and we don't do anything about it, as the scenario has been for the last 3 years.
Where is Iran killing American soldiers?
Did you just miss
inside Iraq?
Did you just miss the guys that were captured there?
I did not.
Okay.
And that's precisely why I say we have to talk directly to Iran, and why I'm less optimistic about a 20,000 troop surge.
All right.
Because until we establish some dialogue directly,
I'm for the chat. I just don't have a lot of confidence in the chat.
It is not a chat.
I'd send you over there.
I'd be happy to. I looked at Milosevic. I put my finger in his chest. I said, Mr. President, if you don't comply with the UN resolution, we're going to bomb you.
I'd send you and your buddy Bill Clinton right over there.
You send me over there, Bill, and I'll tell you what.
General Clark.
Something will happen.
Coming right back with